kind of like I always kept a pulse in both worlds because I was using Tableau, but I kept a pulse in Power BI. Or if I was doing Power BI full time, I kept a pulse in Tableau. So that's been my journey really.
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with Tableau training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome to the Data Nerd podcast. Today we've got an episode lined up for you talking about Tableau versus Power BI. So a very interesting topic, a lot of chatter out there on LinkedIn or just in general about this topic. And I have Tyler Sekou on, or Sekou Tyler. You know, right before this podcast, I was like, I don't want to mess up the pronunciation of your first name, and now I reversed it. This wasn't meant to be. I apologize, but
Oh
welcome.
no, you're
Welcome,
good,
Sekou.
man. Hey, thanks for having me on. No, that's great.
So, Sekou, let me just introduce you to everyone here, and if there's anything I miss out, just feel free to add on to it. Sekou is a Tableau social ambassador and founder of Royal Blue Analytics, a true blue, a true Tableau and Power BI unicorn. Tyler delivers impactful data solutions through visualization, engineering, and training. You could also catch Tyler's podcast, 10 Minute Tuesday, of which I've been a guest on as well, where he brings a variety of guests on and talking about work in data analytics. Sounds about right?
Yeah, I think you summed it up. Yeah. So quick intro. Yeah, Sekou Tyler, founder, CEO of Royal Blue Analytics, like you mentioned, BI, data visualization, data engineering, training enablement, using tools. So try to be a utility knife and we think about the problem more than we care about the technology. So how do we solve the same thing using multiple tools? And then, like you mentioned, 10 Minute Tuesday podcast, where the goal of it is to highlight people's journey in data and understand where they came from, how they got there, and what they're doing. I created it in 2020, 2021. Well, the idea came across in 2020 at the height of COVID when everybody was just talking about their highlights, and I'm
Mm.
thrilled to do whatever, and no one was talking about their journey to get there. So I was like, you know what? I want to hear people's story, so I'll do it
No.
myself.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And it's like short, it's short and so you can produce a lot of content that way, just quick
Yeah.
10 minutes every week, right? So it's
Yeah. I just thought about myself, like as I was consuming content, like long form content, like an hour and a half, 30 minutes or whatever, or hour and a half, 2 hours, like that's just long. So just like, what can I do that's really quick to, get key insights out to people?
oh yeah, I love it. And I like the so how do you might be a little bit off topic, but how do you come up with your guests for this for the podcast?
Yeah, so good question, really good question. So some of it is my network. Oh, well, the brainchild starting out was people I knew in my network.
Mm,
The original origin story of it as well was I wanted to highlight people of color and talk about their journey as well. So there is a piece where there are a lot of Black people in technology, and they might not necessarily be featured on social media or they might be pushing stuff. So I'm trying to use this avenue as a way to connect with people. But then eventually that's grown and expanded, and because of LinkedIn and connections. It's more or less of like if you're in data or you're in leadership or if you're
mm.
just someone who liked my stuff, like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? So for me, I just throw a net out there and
Yeah.
see who wants to jump on and connect. And I love talking to people and connecting with people. So I'm always all about getting people on and getting having this conversation with people.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's great work. I kind of do the same thing. I make all my connections on LinkedIn. That's how I come up with the guests. LinkedIn is a great, I think, I don't know. I probably use LinkedIn more than any other
Yeah.
social platform.
Yeah.
And I probably learn from this as much as anything else as well. Even just doing this podcast, right? Like we're gonna talk about this this topic, Tableau versus Power BI, and I'll come out learning something from it. And so it's always great to to keep learning and keep engaged. So glad you're doing the podcast as well. And you want to talk about so your journey though in like okay, but we're going to talk about Tableau and Power BI. Okay, so I think the consensus out there is that those are the top two in business intelligence. Would you say that's a fair assumption?
And that's my viewpoint of it. If you're looking at bigger stacks, you have people who absolutely hate Microsoft. So they're like, I would never use a Microsoft product ever, right? Open source everything or Linux this or whatever, right? But I think from a general data analyst standpoint, I think those are the top two vendors.
And Gartner comes out with the Magic Quadrant every year, right? And it's always Salesforce and Tableau, or Salesforce and Microsoft in the top two. Actually, I think there should be launch coming out with one very shortly. It's usually around this time,
Yeah,
around
I think so because I know they had their bake off like the end of last year, if I'm not mistaken. So I would think the
they're having the
results will.
conference soon, so I'm assuming they might be.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that would
Right.
make sense.
Yeah. So it's always interesting to look at that, and then it always sparks conversations, right? And the trend that I've seen, as it pertains to Tableau and Power BI, is Power BI is shifting a little bit further away as the leader, at least in from the Magic Quadrant perspective. When I've asked people about it, they tell me that there may be some bias towards Microsoft with when it comes to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and that's why it may shift there. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know the secret sauce of how they come up with it. Like, if it's a survey or if it's like, executive feedback or if it's, different areas. Like, I'm not sure
Yeah.
how they've gone from year to year. So it'd be fascinating to see kind of year over year, like how much that needle has moved, from like the origin of even Tableau with other BI tools or Microsoft other BI tools and just kind of see how it stayed the same and what their metrics are for, you know, these rankings? Like, have they have different metrics in year 2018 that were different in 2025, which means this tool has grown more or not? So I don't know. It's fascinating to see, and I think it just depends on how they're capturing and what they're doing to
Yeah.
measure it.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Um, I think Tableau's come out with a lot of new stuff in this last year, right?
Yeah,
And so I'm curious to see how that that shifts their perspective as well.
yeah,
I'm curious to see what happens there. So, well, tell me about your journey with Tableau and Power BI.
yeah.
When did you start using each tool, and do you prefer one over the other?
Yeah, so my journey started I started my career journey, I started on the help desk. So I was taking phone calls and, I was really always been a techie guy, but then I moved into a process analyst role where I was responsible for identifying trends at the help desk. So that's where I really learned Excel. And it was like, all right, if clinic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has 100 printers that went out at this time of day, it was for me to kind of look at the trends and find the analysis and then give that information to my manager and then basically have a report of, here's the trend and stuff and so on and so forth. So learn that. And then I learned SQL to start picking up that um, instead of doing it in Excel, I started actually learning the SQL to write it and do the group ends and everything that comes along in SQL. And then from there, I left and went to another company where I was a healthcare analyst. Still similar concept, was just more heavily SQL focused.
Mm,
But then I went to a meetup in 2016, I think, 2016, 2017. And it was on how to create a dashboard in an hour. And I didn't know what a dashboard really was. I knew like PowerPoints, right? Because you knew macros, you could refresh it, you could do all that stuff. And that was my idea of a dashboard. But it was on Power BI and it was like how to create a dashboard. And it was like, Will Harvey is my guy, he's my mentor. So if you listen to this, I always give you a shout out every time I talk, but it basically changed my life. And so from there, it was just like, here's how you connect to a data source and here's how you can create these KPIs and do these dashboards and metrics. And ever since then, I was hooked. I was like, wow, because I could create something and ultimately, like, account managers, project managers, whoever they're interacting with, they can answer some of these ad hoc questions that I was responsible for doing. So it'd be like, write this custom SQL query, give this output.
mm,
And then the feedback would be, oh, that's nice. Thank you. I was like, whereas I can create a dashboard, you go answer some of that stuff and I can do some of like the heavy lifting. So I like to say 2016, that was always like my first like introduction to the world. So that's always I've always kept a pulse there just because that was the first experience. Had Tableau been the first one I ever seen, I probably would have the exact same viewpoint. But it's just I saw Power BI first, so therefore it's the one that I saw. Then from there, went to another company and then worked for a startup. And at the time, I was the only BI developer there. We were using Yellowfin, but then we had to migrate over to Tableau. And so that was my exposure to Tableau. This was in 2019. And from there, I was like, all right, I'm big on community. Like, I'm not the smartest person. I'm not going to sit like all day on Google. Like, let me figure out how do I get involved with people. So I found a mentor, which is Chantilly, which I got super lucky, but she became my mentor at the time and which connected. And then, so I learned Tableau, but then at the same time, I started understanding the community aspect of it. And then from there, it was kind of like I always kept a pulse in both worlds because I was using Tableau, but I kept a pulse in Power BI. Or if I was doing Power BI full time, I kept a pulse in Tableau. So that's been my journey really since like 2019 of just understanding what's happening in both worlds and just being aware because like we talked about earlier, those are the two big platforms. So if I'm going to put my energy into the craft, I always want to understand what the big players are doing.
And when you look at the job postings out there, you'll see most job postings have both listed, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for one or the other. Even if they use Tableau, they'll just mention Power BI in there and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So it really puts you in a good spot. Not that they're looking for a job or anything, but just to see like the skill sets that are out there and knowing that you have both of them puts you in a good position. Even I'm assuming now that you have consulting business, your own business where
Yep.
you provide consulting services, and I'm assuming you help out on both sides of the spectrum, both Power BI and Tableau.
Yep, we're in both worlds, and again, we're tool agnostic. So if somebody's using Sigma, or if they're using AWS QuickSight, or if they're using Superset, right? The concepts are the same. Where we understand how to create a story, write SQL, connect to your data sources, what have you. The philosophies just changed within the tool itself. But yeah, I think the mentality I've always had was one, I just want to keep a job. Like I've always just want to stay employed. That's always number one. But it's really like, all right, once I really dove into it, it's like, how can I do, well, my natural inquisitive mind is like, how can I do the same thing in multiple tools? And that's kind of where that philosophy and mindset came from. Was just being like, hey, I can do it this one and this one, but how can I do it another one?
The general like best practices is like you said, it doesn't matter what tool you're using. Like the way you design things is going to be the same regardless, right? The
Yeah.
capabilities may be a little different, but the general data visualization 101 best practices would apply in regardless of the tool.
Yeah, and that really like that actually stuck with me. I went to a sequel Saturday, probably like 2017,
Mm.
and Jonathan Stewart, which I call my mentor, he's basically my big bro, but he did Introduction Data Visualization 101. And it wasn't tool specific. None of his slides had an actual product. So it wasn't Power BI specific, it wasn't Tableau. It was more or less how can I tell a story with data that I have. And he broke down the Gestalt principles and like how to use color. And he broke down color blindness, when to use indicators and stuff. So ever since really that meetup and I kept seeing that type of information, it made the tool like, all right, I understand best practices for this. Now, how can I leverage the tool of choice that I'm working at to then do the best practice?
Yeah. So what happens if there's a tool that you don't know? Do you just say, okay, I'll do it and you just learn it?
So now I got to pick my spots. Earlier on in my career, before I had a kid and before I was married, and when I had like a vast amount of time to really dive into it, I was more prone to dive in and kind of figure it out and go for it. Now being a consultant and now just the limited amount of time that I do have, I'm really particular on the what I spend my time on. Like I'll read like quick snippets or I'll pick up stuff or I'll do a training here and there. But I'm also tailoring, like, I'm very specific on what I need help with. And I think there's been a comfortability in that as well of just saying, like, what, here's what I'm really good at. Here's what I know. If you need somebody who does this, I can help out, but it's not my strength. So there's a curiosity to kind of apply and learn and pick up different things. And even like, say, Sigma, for example, like they have workout Wednesdays. So, if I do like have a couple hours here and there, then I'll pick it up, just kind of understands and get the flow of it and understand it there. But to say like, I will, I'll be the best person for this in this immediate future when I haven't put the work in to really understand it. I try not to dive into it that way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's only a limited amount of time. I realize that as well, especially now that we do all these extracurricular activities, like these podcasts. They take
Yeah.
time. It's not
Yeah.
just we're sitting here recording and then produce it out. There's time and thought, there's marketing. Yeah, there's a lot of things you got to do. But so you got to utilize your time wisely. Um, but you know what I noticed as you were talking through your experience, you mentioned at least three mentors along the way. So is that really is that something you really sought out to get those mentors, or was it just happenstance? Like it just happened, and the mentor happened to come into your life?
I would think it one of my mentors I did seek out. So Chantilly, I just seeked out somebody because like I needed help with Tableau. Like I wanted to be really good at it and I wanted to pick it up. And I just like early on in the days, the ambition that I had was just like I want to be one of the best in the city. So who's doing something who can mentor me, right? So that was a specific need. When on the Microsoft side, my two mentors, I got Patrick LeBlanc, my big bro, Jonathan Stewart, and then even Ryan Wade. Those came kind of naturally and organically because if you haven't heard of it, there's an event called SQL Saturdays every Saturdays in different cities. And what happens is a lot of people, primarily Microsoft community, they speak about different topics. So you come in and then you kind of learn, and it's a free event. So I would always go to different SQL Saturdays that were in the area. So if it's like SQL Saturday Atlanta, Nashville, so on and so forth. But then I went to a session and Patrick was speaking, and like he was just so nice and cool. And again, I have a big emphasis of connecting with people who look like me. And so, I went to Patrick's session, I went to John's section, I went to Ryan's session, and they're all black dudes. And then from there, as I started going to more SQL Saturdays, I would see them and then I would connect with them. And then it
Mm.
just turned into a thing of like, yo, I see you're active. Let me help you like evolve in your career. I can tell you putting the work in. It wasn't like a thing of like, oh, I see you one time and then like next year I haven't seen you again. It's like, what are you working on? I guess they could see my ambition. And so they were more like willing to help me grow and evolve. But even now, like I actually text all three of them today earlier. So
That's great.
even
Yeah.
now, I still talk to them and connect and everything. So I think it's a two-way street where it's just organically, but then I definitely needed wise counsel.
Well, do you serve as a mentor now to other people?
Yeah, yeah, I do. My guy Trav, man, I serve as a mentor. I try and give back as well. So, and I haven't done it, I haven't taught in a while, but I used to teach at Nashville Software School here in Nashville, which is a boot camp. So I would teach Tableau and Power BI. And these were students who were trying to transition from, different jobs that weren't necessarily data related, but then picking it up. So a lot of people there with connections stayed in touch with, but then also did the same thing for Pivot Tech, which is a similar boot camp here in Nashville. And that one specifically, again, my mission is to get more Black people into data analytics. So help mentor there. But now it is more or less of like, how can I connect and give the content? So my 10-minute Tuesday, the idea of that is to be able to like, instead of some of these one-on-one sessions, how can I create a podcast of like, here's my career journey that goes out there that people can listen to. And I have some bigger ideas from like mentoring and connection and giving back that I want to do and leverage. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, and community is a huge part of in business intelligence space, right? In
Yeah.
data, it's a huge part, and it has a huge impact on what you do and how you do it, right? So when we maybe this is the first topic we can touch on as it pertains to Tableau versus Power BI. So I'm a Tableau person. I don't use Power BI. I haven't used it firsthand. I've talked to people who've used it. I've heard the chatter out there and the differences between the two, the pros and cons and whatnot. But from firsthand experience, I can only talk about Tableau.
Yeah.
You having experience in both can touch on aspects of both, unbiased, right?
Yeah.
Unbiased opinions here. All right. So community wise, Tableau has what really drew me to Tableau was the community.
Yeah.
Yes, I loved the tool. I loved what it did. But when I went to my first Tableau conference, that then I was sold. I was like, wow, this is a great community. Like like I go to that conference every year. And now I'm part of that community as a Tableau social ambassador, and so are you. And
Yeah.
so we both have that same network. And it's that network, it's that community, it's um, you Tableau Public in itself is a community, right? You
Yeah.
see you see people posting dashboards and putting on their portfolio and posting it online in Tableau Public, and it's great. It's something that I love about Tableau. I haven't seen as much on the Power BI side as when it pertains to community, but would you say that when it comes to community and resources, that Tableau has the edge over Power BI?
Yeah, so to answer that, I won't say necessarily the edge, right? Like one community is better than another community. I'll
Yeah.
never like will say that in general. I will say it depends on what your focus is and what it is that you want to go after, right? So from a product standpoint, as you mentioned, Tableau Public, right? High end visibility, you can get inspiration, you can connect with people, you see who's who. Tableau, Salesforce does a great job of promoting that. It's free, it's local, you can host it, right? If I'm a data analyst and I need someone to see my resume, or if I just need to connect with people, like huge like platform there. Microsoft doesn't have anything as equivalent to Tableau Public at all. Like it's just not there. Like they have galleries which you can post stuff, but the amount of effort and attention that Tableau Public and even the people who work and that build that product, there's nothing on the Microsoft side like that at all. When it comes to like connection and like LinkedIn or user groups or meetups, tick for tack, man. Honestly, I think it just depends on where you're at. The hardest part between the two is the terminology. Because if you're Tableau, right? Tableau is BI, data visualization, storytelling, right? I know I can go and look for that. Whereas if it's like, all right, I want to do Power BI, but then Power BI rolls into Fabric, and then Fabric rolls into Azure, but it's all on Microsoft. So there's so many different components within Microsoft. When you start looking for this stuff, you're like, I don't really know where to search for because I want to learn Power BI, but then Fabric just came out. But then I also am going to do stuff with SQL DBAs, but they talk about Power BI. So it's kind of like Power BI gets ingested in different areas. And then you have just general Excel and Power Apps. So the terminology of where to actually go is the most challenging part that I found. But then once you find it and you find your community, there is similar concepts of like, oh, you like Power BI. Okay, then where are you going to learn? Oh, cool. I would love to go to your thing, right? And so you kind of build upon that and understand where people are going. I would say the language is the hardest part and just understanding the different products on the Microsoft side.
Yeah, because Tableau obviously its focus is just on business intelligence, whereas Microsoft has a wide range of focuses, not just Power BI. But
Yeah,
I feel like that's also one of its benefits because people start using Power BI because of its integration with the Microsoft product,
right.
right?
Yep.
And so then when it comes to like ease of use or beginner friendly, like that people can start using Power BI, whereas the learning curve in Tableau is a little steeper. And so when it comes to that ease of use, how do you compare the both softwares?
Yeah, so I think it depends on your starting point. So if you're like a blank slate, right? I've only learned Excel and I have no clue what I'm doing. I think they're both can be drag and drop, right? I both can drag a category or a dimension and create a visualization and can color it that way. I know what summary like summarization is. I know I can connect to an Excel file, right? That piece is, very straightforward. It depends on where your brain is. And my analogy with the learning curve was I went to the thing and picked up Power BI, but then I learned data storytelling when I was learning Tableau. So from a storytelling standpoint, when I was mentoring and connecting and being active in the community, I learned that philosophy a lot easier because that's what I saw in Tableau Public. I saw it in, different connections. I was just being active and super active in the community. Now, when I moved over and started doing more Power BI stuff, I was able to translate some of those skills over to Power BI. But what really made me grow was picking up data modeling. So if you're like a person who understands the front end and storytelling, but then you don't know data modeling behind the scenes, it's a little challenge to jump from Power BI. And then on the flip side, if you know data modeling in Power BI and you're like, I know DAX, I know these different things, but then your storytelling component of it is, not the greatest and how to do it. Tableau might be a different curve. So it just depends on where you're at in the journey. But the biggest piece for me was just like being a Tableau developer made me better at storytelling in Power BI being a Power BI data modeler, maybe better in Tableau and a data model.
I think that sums up kind of the like what Tableau's good at and what Power BI is good at. Tableau's good at the visual storytelling. Sometimes you see like amazing, creativity out there. Whereas Power BI is stronger on the data modeling side. Now, I do think they're both improving. Like in Tableau, I know Tableau Prep is out there, but I don't know how you can compare that to data modeling in Power BI. But when it comes to like the visual standpoint, is Tableau a better visually appealing uh, software tool to use compared to Power BI?
So I like to answer that question. It's kind of like either Coke, Pepsi, or Apple, and Android. Like
Mm.
as you mentioned just a second ago, like they're catching up. Like the stuff that people are starting to create in both, even from the front end and the back end. So I'll just answer that from the front end perspective, right? The visualization standpoint, they're starting to be really similar in regards to some of the functionality. So there's just a lot of updates that both products are cranking out that are bringing that line closer together to where, I can technically, whether it's a hack, whether it's not a hack, I can fundamentally do some of the similar stuff between both. Like maybe let's say 80%, right? I can do a rounded bar curve if I wanted to, or I can do a dual axis with some logic or different things of that nature that, is native in Tableau. And then on the flip side, from a data modeling standpoint, think about Tableau, how they just released shared dimensions. Well,
Yeah.
one of the biggest components with Power BI is how do you do a star schema data model, right? You need a shared, say a calendar table and you connect it to two fact tables. For the longest time, that was so challenging in Tableau. You had to do like, scaffolding and like all these different hacks to get your data to join. Now you got a shared dimension. Now you can actually do, star schema. Now you can actually do some of your analysis work, which is sped up. So it's like, the updates that both are doing, they're bringing that line so much closer together that, you know, if I won't say bias, but it's just like it just depends on where you're at in your journey, and what it is they're trying to build. But there's so much stuff on LinkedIn that I'm seeing where people are like, I saw this Tableau dashboard, I want to recreate in Power BI. And then I've seen it on the other side. I've seen this Power BI dashboard and I want to recreate it in Tableau. So I love seeing that type of content out there.
A lot of times, what I used to do when I started off in Tableau, so my journey was very similar to yours. I actually started on the phone doing technical support, right? And then I got into Excel and started doing analytics, and I got a role in that same company working as an analyst, and I was using primarily Excel.
Yeah.
But then I jumped straight into Tableau. Or I got into SQL as well, like you, and then I got into Tableau. I didn't touch Power BI, so it was a very similar journey. From a visual standpoint, like you said, they're catching up to each other. But what I've seen Tableau do now is address some of the shortcomings. For example, um, e- getting into Power BI was easier because it was part of the Microsoft suite of suite, and so
Yeah.
you could start off for free.
Yeah.
Tableau, you could use Tableau Public, but previously you had to only publish it on online.
Right.
Okay, and that was a drawback because people couldn't use data that was, you know, sensitive or confidential. Now, Public allows you to save it locally on your computer, and so that ease of entry, that barrier to entry is less. And so I'm seeing like you said, they're catching up
Yeah.
on some of those things. And also from an AI standpoint, Tableau has really, I would say, their main focus. And I wouldn't be surprised if this upcoming Tableau conference in April is going to be all about
Oh yeah.
AI and
AI. Oh
Tableau
yeah.
agents. That
100%.
that's like they're all in, all hands on
Yeah.
deck on Tableau agent and AI. I know Microsoft already has some of those capabilities. Have you played around with the AI capabilities in both tools, and how do they compare to each other?
Yeah. So I'll answer AI question, but you made me think of a point that really ticks me off when it comes to Microsoft. So when you
Okay.
talked about Tableau desktop coming out and being able to be installed and the barrier to entry,
Yeah.
the great thing about that is Tableau can be on Mac and Windows. The thing that frustrates the bleep out of me with Microsoft is the fact that it's like Windows only. You got to do all this stuff if you're running a Mac, like virtual machine or all this stuff to
Yeah.
even use the product. And that like when I talk to people who are trying to learn it, that like frustrates the bleep out of me that there isn't like a Mac version of it. So
Yeah.
barrier to entry, like so to answer your question, that in itself, I can't download it, even though everybody's trying to push for the cloud. But it's just like I don't know how to set up a because you can't use a Gmail account to sign up for Microsoft, right? You got to have a personal type of account. So
There's limitations there, right?
yeah,
Not it's not as easy as it seems, right?
yeah,
If you don't have the right accounts and the um right operating system.
yeah. So that's like super frustrating and annoying when trying to connect with people trying to learn it. But so from the AI piece of it, yeah, I mean AI is everywhere, right? They're leveraging it, and for me, I've seen content on it. So like Microsoft has Copilot, which is Copilot for the entire like Microsoft suite, not just Power BI, but it's just there for
Hmm.
Excel and Power Automate and the whole Power Platform stuff, right? But it's an additional cost. Like it costs money, and I'm just not spending the money on it. Same thing for Pulse and Tableau agents and everything there. Like I'm consumed the content and I see what they're doing. I see the coolness of it. I just haven't paid for
It's
it,
still
for
very
lack of a
new.
better.
It's still
Yeah,
very new, right? It's I mean, I'm new to it too. I just started using Tableau Agent to play around with it.
yeah,
My take on it is, I think for you and I, people who are experienced in developing Tableau, I don't know if it's at the point yet where it can replace what we do, or if it
yeah,
ever will. I think it's great to automate some of the manual tasks that you may not want to do, but I think the creative nature and the way that you design things will always be there, regardless of what an agent can do for you.
yeah.
Um, I was just talking about this on another panel. I was saying, like, what, imagine the Tableau agent can create everything for you. All the dashboards will look the same. How boring
Yeah.
would that be? Right?
Yeah.
Like that takes away the whole Tableau community and viz of the day. And what's the biggest event at Tableau conference? The
Iron
Iron
Viz.
Viz,
Yeah.
right? And what is Iron Viz? It's all about creativity in Tableau and making things like customizing it. And agent's not going to be able to do that for you, right?
Well, so it's a catch-22. Like, no, I don't think it will take our jobs away, like at a high level, right? I don't think, it will cause people to be like, all right, let me put all this, let's say corporations, for instance, like let's invest, $300,000 in the agents and we don't have a human behind it. It's just like, yeah, no, you're doomed. Uh, because you got to have somebody that understands the data, the requirements, the insights, all the different things that come along with it. Where I see the opportunity is people who know how to leverage it to get stuff faster. So if it's just like Agent Force, can you create all these time-based calculations that I need and dump it into my XML file, right? Whatever. Instead of me having to go copy paste from workbook to this and make sure that right, if it can automatically upload that, that saves hours. And then you just have your templates and then all that stuff that comes along with it. Um, and from what would be fascinating, right? This is on the platform.
Yeah.
If there is a AI Iron Viz section on top of a human section, and then the winner of the human and the winner of the AI compete against each other, and then they see who wins overall.
That's an interesting idea. So you would leverage AI. So it's AI and human. It's like a team.
Yeah, it's like a team. So it'd be like, you got the three Iron Ridge champions. The winner of that goes, and then you have maybe three prompt engineers who are creating some type of dashboard. And
So
then
the
the
best
winner of
a
that,
prompt engineer prompting or AI Iron Viz. Yeah.
yeah,
That-
yeah. And then the
that's
winner of that goes up against AI and you see who wins, right? Now that's the where it could be like a cool thing to do to just say, like, all right, man versus machine.
Man versus machine. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've done that in game shows. Remember in Jeopardy they did that as
Yeah.
well. Um, yeah, and that's a cool idea. So you know how I leveraged agent was I went in with a blank slate. I had data and I had no idea on how to start. And so I just prompted Tableau agent, give me ideas. And then it created things for me that I may not have done
Mhm.
myself. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That is a good idea. And then I would say it inspired me more
Yeah,
than it did the work for me.
yeah,
And then I leveraged that to then customize it and make it my own.
yeah.
So I
It's
think
like,
that's kind of how I see Tableau agent being used, at least from a BI standpoint.
yeah, and I think it's really cool. Like when we went out to Tableau London, and did Data Fam London, I got a chance to see Agent Force there and see it in real time and how it connected to the whole ecosystem. So since Salesforce does own Tableau, right? I'm trying to think, talking terminologies of
Yeah.
Salesforce. And so I was able to see in real time kind of how you can do a prompt to, let's say I am a, customer service agent and I'm doing XYZ and I'm trying to connect with it, but then I want the output to go into a Tableau dashboard. Like thinking holistically about that, that was like really cool of how one person can go from like updating data in the agent to then showing it the output in Tableau, all within kind of one swoop. But again, it's a skill set that's needed.
I think back to, so I used to I mentioned I was part of the call center, right? A technical support, and then I did reporting for that call center. If I look back now, I'm like, if I were to go back, knowing what I know now, there's so much I can do. I just think back to that sometimes. I'm like, I can like, especially now with
Yeah.
AI and agent, I'm like, you can just like automate this all and feed this into a dashboard.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing.
Oh
And
my goodness. Yeah. Oh,
like, and I sometimes wonder, I'm like, I wonder if I could ever get in touch with people who still work there to see what they're doing or what they've done. Uh, but so talk about, so we talked about Tableau's AI functionality and agent. How about on the Microsoft side? Do you have any exposure there on what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean they're doing a lot. Like I said, Copilot is their new product that they're rolling out. Actually, been about a year and some change now. And so again, they're trying to leverage that and do a lot of different things. I see a lot of people, a lot of content like we're both doing, right, where it's not proprietary to the product. So people are leveraging, LLMs to, update their code or update their um, reports that they're doing. I haven't seen so much from the visual side, but I've seen a lot of like just stuff online from a DAX or Power Query perspective of like how would I write this code to generate this output
Mm,
using these different AI models there.
yeah.
So I've seen a lot of people like test the limits of Copilot, but then I've seen ChatGPT and then oh God, what's the one that just came out this week?
DeepSeek.
Yeah, DeepSeek. So I've seen like a lot of people generate like they give them this these DAX problems or these Microsoft problems, and it generates output. So I've just seen, I think like everybody, right? They're just trying to figure out what makes the most sense from an AI perspective,
Yeah.
and from a data. Let me say this differently: from a data analyst, consultant, engineer, everybody's trying to leverage the tools that are out there to see like, all right, how can AI make me more productive?
Yeah. And I think that's the case regardless of what tool you're using. A year from now, the
Yeah, dude, it's like the sky's the limit, man.
sky's the limit. Yeah, it's a little scary sometimes, to be honest, because like you said, you and I haven't had too much exposure with, Tableau agent and working there. And sometimes you think like, what do I have to do differently now?
Yeah.
Or do I have to do anything differently? And if I don't, am I going to be like behind? Yeah, but that's the thing. You're always learning. You can never know enough, right? And you got to keep up with what's the latest and greatest. Um,
The thing that's scare is not the word. The thing when we talked about earlier, mentoring and connecting, the point I'm trying to drive home when I talk to people who are either trying to break into the industry or get up there is to understand the fundamentals. And because with AI, it's so easy to prompt out, here's this request and this report, and then it gives you some code. I copy and paste that code. I have the output and I hit the deliverable that I want. But do you even understand what it created? Because it's like
that's a good point.
it makes it so easy for you to just generate stuff. Whereas if you don't have access to the tools, like are you still as valuable as if you knew how to do basic stuff? So I'm generally I talked to Ben Jones about this, and he does a lot of stuff on like AI literacy, data literacy, and stuff. And his viewpoint changed my viewpoint. He's like, the people who are picking up AI that are trying to get into the industry, they will be dangerous because they'll be able to know the fundamentals and they know how to leverage AI. So they'll be super productive because they understand how to do it both ways.
Well, let me give
Uh,
you a contrary point to that.
yeah,
Um, when you and I both started learning at around the same time, 2016,
yeah,
there was no AI. So how did we learn? We learned by doing or
right,
searching online and seeing how other people do it and trying to replicate that. But now people who are getting into it can just ask AI how to do it and it'll give it to them. And they may not be able to learn it by doing it themselves.
right.
So is that not a gap there? Like, would they not, will they be able to retain and learn as much um, because they're depending more on AI doing it for them rather than them doing it themselves?
Yeah, I think it's like everything, right? It's a tool, and it depends on what you're trying to ask. So if it's just like if the why or the question that you're asking is like, I have a deliverable and I just need to get out the door, AI is going to help me, then you're cutting the process short because you're not picking it up. You're just trying to get this thing out the door. That way, you can work on the next thing. You didn't really learn as much in the craft. But if you're like doing it where, say, you're doing like a workout Wednesday or you're trying to understand what an LOD is and the difference between include and exclude, right? If you're using AI, like, hey, I have this calculation, it's not giving me results, I have include, right? If you're trying to use it as a learning mechanism, then that speed up process can give you an answer potentially a lot
Mm.
faster than if you go, how we did it, right? Go into YouTube or search and read,
Yeah.
10 blogs or watch 10 different YouTube videos that are 20 minutes apiece, right? There's so much time when it comes with that, where it's like, if you can leverage it, you might be able to pick up that little nugget that you picked up. So it just depends on like how it's being used.
Yeah. No, yeah, and that's a fair point. What about from an education standpoint? I know Tableau is really highly involved with, higher education. You look at like university programs or these data schools or certification programs. Tableau offers a lot of their the stuff for free. Tableau has e-learning and a lot of learning content out there. Does Microsoft also have something where for if anyone wants to learn Power BI where they can leverage some educational resources?
Yeah, so two ways you can do it. I think if you're nonprofit, I think nonprofits definitely get some type of benefits as well. I'm
Mm.
pretty sure they have education partnerships as well. I don't know like the exact cost of what it takes to go there, but they have partnerships. And then Microsoft Learn itself is free, so it's actually a free training and learning platform. So like all the certifications on the Microsoft side have a learning path that's built out, and it's all free. So if you're like, I want to learn let's say data analyst, the data analyst exam for Power BI. It does have a free training course that goes through the overviews, as videos, as testing materials. There's definitely things there, but then like everything else, right? If it's not higher education, you're a data analyst trying to pick it up, you can use that. You can use Coursera, you can use all the different tools that people are creating.
Yeah,
But yeah, from a higher ed perspective, I think there's things there to connect people with it.
nice. Yeah. Now, another big point when it comes to Tableau versus Power BI that I see out there is the cost perspective, right? If you're a organization or a business who's trying to implement either solution enterprise wide, they say that Tableau is more costly than Power BI, and Power BI is more affordable. Do you? I don't work on procurement or anything like
Sure.
that, and I assume you don't either, right? But um, my take on it is when it comes to licensing, like they both end up costing the same when you want to produce or you want to get it out there at an enterprise level with a certain amount of users. I think maybe initially, at least previously, the cost was less in Microsoft, but now Tableau has done a lot to reduce that as well. So how do you see it from a cost perspective?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in like a number of ways. So It depends on what you're saying, cost from a financial standpoint, or cost from a manpower standpoint, cost from like a migration standpoint, right? All this stuff is going to cost, whether it's man hours, whatever it is, right? So for like, let's say bigger organizations who might have, I don't know, throw a number out there, 10,000 licenses, and they have, 5,000 dashboards and 300 prep flows and all this stuff, financially speaking, theoretically, it could be cheaper to migrate to Power BI because from a headcount perspective, right, some of that licensing stuff could be cheaper, right? It's just there. We're migrating to Microsoft, we might get a deal, whatever it is, right? But you're losing money because that's a lot of different resources that you have to migrate over, which will then cost additional money. So at that point, is it just cheaper to stay where you're at because, the different components and what's the why behind it? Because again, it's not just all financial, it's manpower, it's hours, it's migration. It's just a lot of stuff that's built in there. Um, Whereas on the other side, right, if you are a Microsoft company and, say you're on a particular license, because sometimes if you're like E3, E5, E7, E9, like some of these different enterprise levels, sometimes they throw in Power BI, like the lowest level Power BI Pro, which is free. So it's just like one of those things is like, well, if we're already getting this for free and we're starting out, then like I might as well just use what we have because we're paying for all these different other services. So there's kind of no point in going outside the box because it's already included in there. So I think it just depends on like where you're at. If you're a startup, I only have this amount of money, whereas I don't have this amount of money. Like I'm strictly financial at that point, right? So I'm just going to be like, what's my bottom line? Where am I saving at? So it just varies. It just really varies on like where you're at in your process and in your journey, and where you're trying to cut the dollars. But just realize when you cut the dollars, you're gonna lose it somewhere else for a short, even if it's just short term.
Yeah, yeah. I think the question you have to ask yourself is not like which one costs more or less from a dollar standpoint.
Yeah.
You have to look at a big picture, right? Like what's the better solution, regardless of what the cost is, and
Yeah.
how will that help the
Yeah,
business?
like what does that look like? All right, cool. I'm a CFO. I see our bottom line is we saved X amount of dollars. All right, what does our resourcing look like? Oh man, we only got one developer, and then we got to go train up these people. All right, let's go send 20 people to this training thing to learn this other tool. And it goes both ways, right? It goes from Microsoft going to Tableau. Like if people, all the time we see it all the time where directors come in and they're like, I love this tool. We're gonna go Tableau, so we're gonna migrate everything over. Cool. All right, we'll migrate, but then you got to go train your staff. There's a 6 month wait. Like it just goes like those decisions of like cost. Like there's more than just the bottom line that goes into it, and understanding who's available, who can get to work on it, so on and so forth.
I feel like people who throw out the idea about migrating are people who don't work in business intelligence. And so sometimes I feel like they don't know the amount of work it takes to
Yeah,
produce this stuff, and it's not easy to migrate over. Like it takes time, and
yeah.
it's not just, oh, I'm going to create a bar graph in another tool, and it'll be easy. It's
Takes way
it's
more
it's not
time.
it's actually hard. It's easier to start from scratch than it is to migrate.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen like a number of ways. Like I've seen where people come in and like, we're just using this product, we're using a stack, and that's what we're going to use, right? There's nothing else. I've seen where new people have come in, right? You might have a new director of IT, and what they've known in their whole career is one product. So I don't care what y'all are using. Here's what we're going to use. This is what I know. So this is what we're going to build in. And then I've seen where people have actually gone through, right, with some of the tougher times and technologies of just looking at it from a price perspective, and have had a hybrid approach where, certain users really rely on this, but then this department, y'all are only logging in once a month. So we can migrate y'all because y'all not using it to begin with, right? So I'm starting to see like hybrid approaches as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I think anything I'm missing in terms of like comparisons, anything that I've overlooked based on your experience?
No, I think like that line between the two is getting much closer from a visualization standpoint. The engineering piece of it is getting closer as well. And like a lot of this stuff is starting to just start to be really similar, where you have your compute, which is in Snowflake, Databricks, Azure, whatever it is, right? You have your databases, but then you have your front end tools. And then it's just starting to be like, what resources do I have available to work on this stuff? Who's learning it, and what can we do from a reporting standpoint? And so I don't know, man. It's been fascinating to think about because as I was preparing for this podcast, I just thought about my journey,
Yeah.
and I was just looking at. Ironically, I like updated a dashboard I did like 5 years ago, and I was just like, wow, the hacks I had to do 5 years ago, I don't have to do as much because of all the updates. So like all the updates are just starting to make things a lot more just easier and kind of commonality. It's just like, how do I do this and this philosophy and different tools? But I don't know, man. It's going to be cool to see. Like, I'm starting to see more people just generally talk about both products openly. Before it's kind of like a line in the sand. You're either on this team or you're on this team. But I'm starting to see more people kind of blur that line.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting to see. But no, great conversation. I love your insights. And I'm assuming you're going to be at Tableau conference,
Yep, that's the
April.
goal. Hopefully, I get selected as a speaker to talk about some
You
stuff.
you've spoken before, right?
I did. Me and Chantilly spoke twice last year. Wow. Yeah, we did art of big data storytelling. So took about similar philosophies and just how do you tell a story using a product, and we did that in San Diego and we did it in London last year.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll meet up then, for
Yeah,
sure
man.
in April. But appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Anytime, man. This is great. I'd love to talk about this stuff. So appreciate you having me on.